And welcome to the Way podcast. No,
Show me the way. This is the way, guys. This is the way, brothers.
brothers. So yeah, welcome everyone to the Shitlord Preachers podcast. It is our 10th episode. So
10 already, man. All
10,
right.
man. 2018 is going to be a year that we can pump out a lot more episodes.
Hopefully 11.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, at least get to episode 11 by the end of the year. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Amos Joseph, and look, we actually have a viewer on, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. Hello, viewer.
My name is Amos Joseph. I'm joined by my good friend here, Brook Potter. For those of you who don't know us, we were both preachers in the past and eventually got into political, social commentary, stuff like that. Therefore, we created the Shitlord Preachers podcast live stream event fiesta.
We don't know what we're doing, man.
We don't know what we're doing.
We waste an hour and a half every week. And
exactly. We talk
sometimes
about
it's great.
Yeah. We talk about memes. We talk about politics. We talk about
Melania's shoes.
Melania's shoes. That was another episode. Like I said, my name is Amos Joseph. Here I'm joined by Brook Potter. Brook, introduce yourself.
Let me introduce myself to the fine people out there. So, right. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Brook Potter. I am originally from the twin island nation of Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. Is this switching between us? I don't know. It's.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I originally from the Caribbean, and I recently, as of last year, made the move out to the UK, and I'm making a life for myself out here. And as Amos rightly said, we met on the mission field. You know, we were both kind of itinerant ministers. And we just noticed that a lot of the cognitive issues that we saw plaguing the ministry arena, we started to see a lot of that in the political arena. And seeing as the state is the biggest, outside of religion, moral entity, we got very concerned. As I say, the state has the power to, take away rights, and do all this other kinds of stuff. And if not checked, it has the ability to really, actually end a lot of lives. So he and I got into these great political discussions, and it's just, it just spilled over and be like, let's share this with the good people out there. And we've been doing it ever since. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. So
yeah, like he was saying, we tend to get into I get into the bad habit of every time we do a little bit of a recap, sort of a preliminary talk about what we're going to talk about, just talking about the articles we'll be sharing, different topics we want to get into. And we have to stop ourselves every time leading up to the podcast that we don't start having our discussions about what we're talking about, because we can easily lose out on a lot of the good conversation, reactions, initial thoughts, stuff like that. But a couple things to go over. I guess we're going to be talking about. Brook's going to be talking about the NHS, which is the National Health Service. Is that what it is? Yeah.
It's the National Health Service of the UK
in the United Kingdom. Basically, that's their universal healthcare system, which is oh so efficient and takes care of all their citizens. No one ever dies under that under that system. What is it? The third largest employer in the world?
I don't know. That's interesting. I'll have to check that out.
I've heard they're one of the largest employers in the world.
It would be.
It's run by the state.
Yeah.
So, and I'll be talking about some things with the wage gap. Now, the wage gap's been talked to into the ground, and lots of people talked about it, but I actually found someone was on Twitter was quoting a bunch of articles basically trying to debunk the idea that is typically used to debunk the wage gap myth, which is that
what is the wage gap?
So real quick, for those of you who don't know the wage gap, I got to explain that. So the wage gap is this idea that basically that there is a gap in wages, and which is actually earnings when you look at what exactly, how they've calculated these numbers. So the average the average woman would make 77 cents on the dollar compared to a man. When you look at, and we look at, the real variables that aren't being considered is choices, I know differences in career paths that men and women tend to take, and this is sort of where this person is really trying to debunk this argument. So I basically pulled up a couple of the articles that this person was quoting, and it's funny because they interchange the words wages and earnings, which is the real issue here. Is when you look at the wage gap, is you're looking at hourly wage, whereas if you're looking at earnings, which is actually where this wage gap came from, women can actually earn less in the long run because of different decisions like having children, getting married. They tend to take more time off, things like that. And overall, psychologically, women are not as career driven as men. Now, am I saying not all women are career driven? Obviously not. Am I saying, all men are career driven? No. Anyone who's worked in any job knows that you can have lazy people, both men and women.
Sure.
You can have motivated both men and women at your jobs. It's just a matter of the decisions we make as men and women greatly affect this wage gap, and a lot of left-leaning Democrats, and feminists tend to just debate the pure sort of take all the wages of women, or I should say take all the earnings of women, take all the earnings of men, divide it out, and that's our number. And it's like you're not considering different factors, different variables. So I pulled up a few articles that are examining the wage gap, and they definitely identify variables, but not the variables that people would like them to believe. These.
So are you saying, Amos, that women are paid less for the same job as men?
Am I saying that?
Because that's illegal, isn't it?
That is illegal.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can actually prove the wage gap, it would be dealt with immediately.
Yeah, you can actually go to court.
You can actually go to court, but if you can't prove it, you don't have a case. Therefore, It's not. Is it really happening to them if you can't prove it to be happening? Isn't that called a lie?
Wouldn't like the purest sense of that be if women were really cheaper than men, wouldn't businesses only hire women?
And see, that's a whole other thing too, is there's some businesses nowadays that are trying to hire more women as a status that they're sort of more progressive as a business.
Right.
Which can actually be sexist in the other direction, if you want to call it reverse sexism, because now
it's discrimination.
It is discrimination. You're basically choosing based upon sex rather than actual, looking at the, if you can actually make money. Like if I have, if I have to pay a woman, let's say 10% more than a man. No, actually, if I have to pay a man
10% more than a woman, yeah.
Either way, if I can, or if I could pay both of them the same, but the woman is less qualified.
Yeah.
Some companies might hire that woman.
Right. So they discriminate against the man to hire the woman for more diversity.
Right. And the wage gap goes further than between just a gender issue. It also gets into a lot of different races. And sort of the benchmark tends to be the straight white male in America tends to make more money than a woman. But it, like I said, doesn't take into account education, doesn't take into account different choices. It's been shown in some studies that men and women in some cases can make a little more money if they go through the exact same career choices as a man. If they don't have children, don't get married, have the same college education, get the same job, and have the same amount of time working, it could be either more even, it's close to even, or sometimes men or the woman, they can make a little bit more than each other. And some of these articles actually even go like, women make 96% of men. It's like, is that just not good enough? Like you're always going to have inequality.
Right, because no two people are the same.
Right. So,
but then you also have the disparity. Like I'm watching this take place in Iceland. Iceland supposedly is the first country to outlaw, pay disparity. Never mind, they did this like 67 years ago. They did this exact same thing. And
Right.
countries all around the world, I mean, equal pay acts have been passed all around the world. But again, because, people want political spin and they don't actually look at the data, of course, it hasn't solved the issue. So they've been passing these ridiculous laws every 4 or 5 years to do the same thing because they think it's systematic oppression or discrimination. Now that theory
Right.
has been debunked, now that the sexism and all this other stuff has been debunked,
Right.
because I remember I told you about that blind study that was done in Australia where they took the names off of the resumes and they went strictly on the academic criteria.
Mhm.
Men still got the preferential treatment for the jobs, right? And the
Right.
minute they put they now say, well, no, don't do blind resume searches, because only when you put the female name on, exactly what you're saying, companies discriminate for women against men. So they're now saying, well, don't just put the names back on because that's an advantage for women. So this whole
Right.
discrimination thing has been fully debunked. But at least Iceland acknowledges that it's about lack of representation in the higher paying fields.
Right.
It's
Right.
exactly what you said. Yeah.
And then so I'm going to go through an article on that and just a couple numbers that I found that, because the way they're debating these issues, the way they're presenting their facts, don't take into account all of the variables. And there's just so many variables when you're dealing with people and trends that you have to take into account as many as you can to present an actual fair argument. And like we were saying, if you can't really prove it, is it really happening?
Right. Exactly.
We can say there's discrimination in other ways.
It's not even to say that, okay, maybe some women are paid less. You could probably prove that, but is it discrimination? Is it sexism? That's
right. Because you got to look at it because you can even look at and there's certain fields that are maybe more women dominated, and a
like
man
teaching.
doesn't. Yeah, and
There's
men
some.
just right, and men don't really. What if men don't make as much money in those jobs because they can't? They're not a certain way. They don't behave a certain way that is, I don't know, conducive to being a nurse or being a teacher. I've worked in jobs that have been mostly women, actually, in the upper management, and I was in. Well, I shouldn't say upper man. I was in management, and I was one of 2 managers that were men out of 12 managers. Well, I shouldn't say 12. It was actually 10 managers, and 8 were women, including the general manager. It was a restaurant I worked at. And what if you could say that's sexist against men?
Right. I mean, is that sexism, or is that, a merit-based economy? It's the same thing with the prisons, right? More men go to prison than women. Does that mean the prison system is sexist? I mean,
more men die than women in jobs.
Right. Is work accidents sexist towards?
I don't know, man.
But go ahead with the article, man. What have they done? What have
so I'm gonna go.
How they jiggle the numbers?
Exactly. It's gonna be a quick. Let's see here. Application. Here we go. So one of the first things they use here is the Pew Research Center, which I think is pretty good on being pretty. I shouldn't say neutral, but at least it's there's no real leaning in the Pew Research Center. But so they said racial gender gap persists in the U.S. despite some progress. So it still says, hey, there's progress.
Great.
So it talks about so white men out-earn Black and Hispanic men and all groups of women. But see, here's what's interesting. There's this weird group here called Asians that somehow make more money than both groups.
Wow.
Even though they're a minority. So and it's not to say like that's wrong or that's whatever, but what I think is interesting is this leftist narrative, this feminist narrative of trying to make it a race issue, trying to make it a minority issue, when Asians, and we even talked about, they don't state this in here, but even Jews are minorities in America.
Yeah.
And they're outperforming white men and white women.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And the reason for that is what? What would you? I mean, obviously, I mean, let me not answer the question.
I think it might have something to do with culture. I mean, me being half Chinese, I know the culture tends to uh, push for a sort of a degree of sort of excellence, hard work ethic,
Right.
pursuing higher education, things like that. Now, I obviously don't fit any of those things, being mixed and completely off the rails as a Chinese person. But overall, the culture tends to push in that direction. Now, culture among Hispanic men and Black men, I mean, you really got to dig deep and look at, okay, what is exactly going on with a lot of these cultural things. If you look at, what is it, 13 or 15 million illegal immigrants in the U.S. from Latin America.
Yeah.
A lot of them, they definitely make, from what I've heard, they definitely make, decent money for what they do. However, they're more in the manual labor sector. They're in a lot of these, or construction. Yeah. Construction, farms,
farming,
stuff like that. Those don't necessarily pay. I mean, they pay good enough to get, for you to have a decent life, but they don't pay you to have, mansions and cars and stuff. You have what you need. They even have money they can send back home and stuff. We're not going to make this an immigrant discussion, by the way. I'm just saying
we've got enough trouble with the immigrants, man.
We're looking at the variables here that tie into that. Now with the Black population, well, you can talk all sorts of stuff with that, and I don't think we should get into that. But you want to look at issues in culture, and overall, how the group tends to behave, what sort of goals they have, how they be, what sort of, do they tend to pursue higher education? Do they tend to pursue careers that pay a certain way, stuff like that?
Right. So as a half Asian, your opinion is half on this. So what kind of career are Asians going for?
Some into the finance sectors, some into fields that can definitely use higher mathematics even.
Sure. Some of them are satellite engineers.
Some of them are.
Some of them are.
And but yeah, they tend to pursue higher careers that will pay better, but also could require more higher education, but pays off for them.
Right.
Right. So this is I don't know if it's a really long article. I'm just going to try to skim through it quick. I will post the link to this article in the description after we're done with this. But it says large racial and gender gaps in the U.S. remain, even as they've narrowed in some cases over the years. So it acknowledges still that there's definitely been, the gap is closing. Says, but among full-time and part-time workers, Blacks in 2015 earned only 75% as much as whites in the median hourly earnings. So this is what's interesting. They use the word wage gap, but then they're talking about earnings.
Earnings, which is different. Explain the difference.
Well, wage is what you're getting paid per hour. Earnings is what you make. So if you and I are paid the same, but I work more hours,
yeah,
I earn more.
Correct.
We have the same wage. Right. And so this is where a lot of these things are being taken into account. Now, the Pew Research Center, I don't know, I skimmed through this last night and got a few things. One of the things that I just kept finding so interesting is the fact that Asians outperform white people.
Damn Asians, man.
And I mean, they haven't even put in Jews yet, but
that would completely skew the data.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's probably conveniently left out.
But here's the thing, though. I mean, Jews became white people a while ago.
Right. Culturally, yeah.
I'm saying in a political landscape, they tend to be. I mean, you have someone like Ben Shapiro, who's called a white supremacist, wearing a yarmulke. So,
I see what you're saying.
So they basically go through all this, and I think one of the interesting things. So then they're saying some of the wage gaps can be attributed to the fact that lower shares of Blacks and Hispanics are college educated. Gee,
Fair enough. Yeah, lifestyle choice, exactly, not discrimination. I would
U.S.
agree with
workers with a 4-year degree earn significantly more than those who have not completed college. Also
that. Fair
true.
enough. Yeah, yeah, lifestyle choice, not
So then they,
discrimination.
they try to take that into account. And look, everyone's making more money.
Right, when they adjust
But
for it.
Asians still make more.
Damn
so
Asians, man.
um, so I'm just gonna kind of summarize what I remember from the article here, but it basically just it looks at all the different factors that tie into how wage is affected.
Right.
And at no point does it ever say, can it really put its finger on saying that, here we go. This is the last part here. The remaining gaps are not explained by those. Oh, the remaining gaps not explained by those concrete factors are often attributed, at least in part, to discrimination. Blau and Kahn point out, however, that there are portions of these unmeasured difference that could be due to factors other than discrimination, gender differences in behaviors like risk aversion or negotiation. Meaning women tend to avoid high-risk jobs, and they're less likely to try to negotiate for a higher wage. So there's that, as well as the portions of the measured difference. So you can't measure discrimination. Right. At least not in the way that people would like to. At least the narrative would like to push for. Let's see. Women or minority not entering a high-paying STEM field because of experiences may be rooted in prejudice, such as greater encouragement for men than women to pursue these studies, which is interesting. That ties into the Google memo.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, where he's trying to explain how can we better get more women into STEM fields, because our society tends to encourage men to do it. So he and he got in trouble for actually suggesting such a thing. Correct. And it says here, blacks and whites' views and experiences of the workplace differ. When it comes to racial discrimination in the workplace, most Americans, 60% say blacks and whites are treated about equally. 60% of Americans say they're treated equally. Let's see here. Pew Research reports that 2/3, so this is where we're getting into the discrimination factor. Right. 2/3 of blacks say black people are generally treated less fairly than whites in the workplace. Okay. 22% of whites agree, and 38% of Hispanics agree. So the two other races that they're using, blacks and Hispanics, there is a minority in agreeing on this 64% majority. Right. And this is all opinions. Right. So 2 in 10 black adults and 16% of Hispanics say that in the past year they have been treated unfairly in hiring, pay, or promotion because of their race or ethnicity. Those are minority numbers. I mean, I'm not saying they're illegitimate. That's not happening. But does that necessarily say it's an overwhelming problem?
If the majority are saying that has not been the case, that's actually a good indication that this is not a systemic racist issue.
Right. So let's see. Just 4% of white adults say the same. So, okay. So if you want to say 4 to 5 times as many blacks and Hispanics feel that they're treated unfairly than white men. Okay. While 40% of blacks say their race or ethnicity has made it harder for them to succeed in life, just 5% of whites and 20% of Hispanics say this.
That's a very ambiguous statement.
Which exactly is, it's saying in life. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Succeeding in life, that could be anything from having a family and kids to being at the top of your career path to founding
being an NBA star, being a big time rapper with lots of bitches and hoes. I mean, that could be anything.
Right. Some 31% of white. This is the thing that I really wanted to get to, because this really gets into the tackling the prejudice issue, which is all opinion, experiences. It's not actual hard concrete data. Right. Because they said all the concrete factors they could look at, there's definitely a disparity, but there's nothing to prove that it is actual discrimination.
Exactly right.
because it's all opinion down here. At least 6 in 10 whites and Hispanics and about half of blacks say their race or ethnicity hasn't made such a difference. So just over half of blacks and a majority of whites and Hispanics think their race or ethnicity hasn't made a difference in their success.
Right.
So I'm just going to assume, I'm wondering if these people are even successful people.
Good
so
question.
If half are saying their race isn't played into their success, are they successful already? So, I mean, that doesn't, then it's, of course, we're getting into what is success. That's a subjective thing.
You would need to look at the sample. You'd need to get more data on that.
Right. And then it gets here too. So for their part, a quarter of women say their gender has made it harder for them to succeed in life. Still subjective, but only a quarter.
It doesn't even say the career. That's when you know you're jiggling the numbers, right?
Right.
You're not going to say in life as opposed to what, right? Death?
What jobs too?
Yeah, it doesn't even narrow it down to just
7% of men. So how are any men? I mean, if it's such a discrimination, how are any men finding it hard to succeed in life?
Yeah.
6 in 10 men and women say their gender hasn't made such a difference. So that's 60%. But men are more likely than women to say their gender made it easier to succeed. Oh, 30% versus 8%. Okay. In addition, 2013
guys over 6 feet tall.
found that 1 in 5 women say they have faced gender discrimination at work. In what way? See, what is gender? I mean, you can't lift something heavy at a manual labor job. You're being made fun of because you're behaving a certain way that is you're congruent with how a woman behaves.
Your woman's studies degree didn't qualify you for the job. I mean, those are just ridiculously vague terms.
Yeah, including 12% who say they have earned less than a man doing the same job because of their gender. 12%. Okay, well, same job.
Say that, but that's illegal.
Experience. There's experience. There's other things. Doing the same job. If I can wash dishes and you can wash dishes, who's going to wash dishes faster? I mean,
right.
If women are so good at making sandwiches, they should be making more money making sandwiches.
Every woman should own a Subway. There you go.
That's how you tackle the gender wage gap. Anyways, by comparison, 1 in 10 men said they have faced gender-based workplace discrimination. Where? How? In what way? Anyways, including 3% who say their gender has been a factor in so 3% of men earn lower wages. How does that happen?
Wow, it's interesting. And I mean, some do. I mean, yeah, not all guys are over 6 feet tall and good looking, and
Yeah, but
some men beg for a living.
Here's a quick short one. So this is the American Economic Association.
Oh, right. Okay.
Using panel study of income dynamics, microdata over the 1980 to 2010 period, we provide new empirical evidence on the extent of trends in the gender wage gap, which declined considerably during this time. By 2010, conventional human capital variables while gender differences in occupation and industry continue to be important, moreover, the gender pay gap declined more slowly at the top of the wage distribution than in the middle or bottom, and by 2010 was more noticeably higher at the top. So the higher wage groups, the gap was slowing down and it's closing, but it was still closing.
Right.
So I'm wondering, like we talk about the market, we talk about how wages can behave based on the market. Jobs are changing all the time, and how people are being paid for that is changing too. So like it's not looking at what exact fields and stuff, but it says, I'm just using this because these are the articles that were used by this Twitter person.
Right.
Let's see. We then survey the literature to identify what has been learned about the explanation for the gap. We conclude that many of the traditional explanations continue to have salience.
Yes, salience.
Yeah. Although human capital factors are now relatively unimportant in the aggregate, women's workforce interruptions and shorter hours remain significant in high-skilled occupations, possibly due to compensating differentials. Gender differences in occupations and industries, as well as differences in gender roles and gender division of labor remain important. Research on experimental evidence strongly suggests that discrimination cannot be discounted, but can it be proven?
Right.
Psychological attributes or non-cognitive skills comprise one of the newer explanations for gender differences in outcomes. Our effort to assess the quantitative evidence on the importance of these factors suggests that they account for a small to moderate portion of the gender pay gap, considerably smaller than, say, occupation or industry effects, though they appear to modestly contribute to these differences.
Sure.
So what did we come out of that article?
Yeah, I mean, what they're basically saying out of that is that people at the top, they're once upon a time there weren't that many women CEOs. Now there are more women, going for these top level jobs and stuff like that. So that's accounted for the narrowing that it spoke about. They've alluded to the possibility of discrimination. There's no evidence necessarily to support that. But at the same time, they talk about, shorter hours and all this other stuff does factor in. They couldn't dismiss it. That's basically what they've said.
Now here's the last one, because they started talking about women's participation in the workforce.
Right.
So basically it said if the U.S. economy would be $1.6 trillion larger if American women entered and remained in the workforce at the same rate as women from Norway.
Right.
It would translate to roughly $5,000 more for each American. So here's what I'm going to skim through this kind of quick here.
Right.
Basically, in 2000, here we go. So a lot of fluctuating figures are basically saying how much of the percentage of women from the age of 15 to 64 are participating in the workforce. Basically just your normal, from the earliest that you can work till just before retirement usually.
Right.
We are at 67.3%. Norway, let's see. Oh yeah, US Today reports. Let's see here. Norway, which reported similar work participation levels in the 1970s as the US, today they report a participation rate of 76%. So almost 10% more.
Right. Do they want to know why?
So here's where I was like a bit skeptical.
Right.
And so you see,
I can tell you why.
Well, I could tell you one thing I found. I just typed into Google, what is the birth rate in the US? It's 1.85. What is the birth rate which is actually the lowest it's been in a while for the US.
Sure.
Norway has a 1.75 birth rate.
Yeah, which means women are not getting pregnant.
Which is they said it's their like 7th consecutive year of a decline in the birth rate.
Correct.
So what you're seeing here is you have a country that is having a decline in their birth rate, which is allowing more women to work in the workplace. Is that necessarily a good or a bad thing? Well, it depends upon what are your goals as a nation. Or do you want to have a growing population, or do you want to have a declining population?
But also, they have very high taxes, which is, again, this is like a big thing. The US, you can actually afford to retire at 64. They can't necessarily do that in Norway. The retirement age at one of their last debates was actually suggested to go up to 70 because they need all these people working to maintain the welfare state. So that's
so you
not
never
really
know
a
that
fair comparison.
Right. So you never know if the culture is even pushing for that too.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
The culture and just the overall society is pushing for more women to be involved. Not only, I don't know if possibly earlier in their life, but also stay on later in their life. Because you're definitely encompassing the entire group of what we consider normal working age from about 15 to 64.
Yeah, I think there's, I've just checked it here. It's actually 67 is the current retirement age in Norway. They're debating to push it to 70 for this exact same reason. They have heavy taxation. You cannot save as much money in Norway into your retirements and your pensions and stuff like that. So literally people work right up until their 70s, possibly even into their 80s. So yeah, that's not because the US is wealthier, you could actually work less, and that's actually a good thing, right? Not necessarily a bad thing.
And then there were a couple other points which I didn't quite include into this, but anyone watching can definitely look into this if they want. But it talks about this idea of what's called the fatherhood bonus versus the motherhood penalty, which is the idea. What they tried to present is women tend to lose wages when they have children, whereas men tend to make more money when they have children.
Correct.
They said because, and it's like, well, that only makes sense because women take care of the children.
Yeah, and men have to work harder to take care of two people rather than, well, three people rather than just two.
Right, and when men negotiate that actually is a pretty good bargaining point to say, hey,
sure.
I have kids to take. You see in movies, I have kids to feed.
Right, exactly.
So, and then one thing that I'm seeing, it's creeping up in the feminist sphere of thought, is this idea that as care providers, as women, mothers, care providers, they somehow deserve pay.
Right, for
being a mother. Right, they call it unpaid labor, domestic labor. I'm like, since when?
It's a choice.
Right, and then they feel, well, this choice is sort of forced on. It's social programming, social conventions, all this stuff.
Gender roles.
Like gender roles. I mean, it's only been happening ever since, male and female have been a thing.
The dawn of civilization.
But yeah.
The rising of man from the ape, sure.
Right. It's just, so am I saying, is that supposed to be some sort of like, archaic idea? Well, no. It's just, you need to take that into consideration when these choices are made. It's not the government's job to pay mothers for this unpaid labor of them watching their own kids. I mean, if in a hypothetical world, if small children and babies and infants could somehow produce some sort of labor and make money,
right?
In a perfect world where that could happen, would you make your children pay you for taking care of them? Because
we had that, right? And this is what people kind of fail to realize, right? Back before the Industrial Revolution and the division of labor, the whole family worked on the farm, right?
But I mean, they're saying it more on the way they talk about it is more on the infant side. Like, I mean, if you just gave birth, so they're talking about paid maternity leave, stuff like that,
right,
which is a whole other topic. But they're saying, for just having a child, you should be paid, and it's like,
right. Well, and I know what you're saying. It's not a wage as per se, but I mean, this is it. Children used to work on the farm, right? Very young kids and stuff like that. Everybody kind of pulled their weight. Compensated anymore for that. And again, this kind of plays into the realities about feminism, this new third wave feminism, where it's really not about equality, it's about special benefits for women. So as much as a woman could make the choice to have a baby and all this kind of stuff, that's called a disadvantage. Her choice to have a family is at a disadvantage to men.
Well, society created that disadvantage.
Right, setting the stage, the idea that men and women are in competition when they're not. They're actually, trying to build a life together. They're kind of, codependent to some degree.
Right.
With the family unit, but that's called toxic masculinity. It's called social convention, all this other nonsense. Never mind, it's worked for centuries. But yeah, it's just tapping into this idea that, okay, so if the women are not going to work for the 9 months or the year and a half for which they're having the kids, who's going to pay? Well, the men are going to pay, obviously, because the women aren't working, right?
And us as men, we're totally willing to pay.
Right. I mean, that's what the man does. He goes and he works for his family, but now they're trying to use the power of the state to get more money out of men who don't have to, get pregnant and do all this other stuff so that they could subsidize the choice of women. And that's not fair. I mean, because men don't have any choice with that. They're being robbed of their money, to pay for the women's, right? So
Women's is, yeah. Because
the women, I think, the women and their vaginas, right?
This is where we get into men's rights activism territory. But
women's choice, they have to take responsibility just as much as men do.
Right. So they're trying, like I said, this person put out like 12 separate tweets trying to dismantle this choice argument, when all across here it just says there are gaps, there are inequalities, we can't prove there's discrimination. They don't take in enough of variables because they don't talk about which fields, which jobs, why these things. And then they take into account, college degrees. Well, college degrees for what jobs?
And what degrees? Yeah.
And what degrees? I mean, lesbian dance theory is not a degree that's going to pay you really that much more.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, it's like what you basically you gave out a lot of facts and figures, which is great, but you don't prove anything.
Correct.
These articles even say these are abstract ideas. These are abstract things we can't really measure. And even says unmeasurable, like, ooh, it's like, no, you really can't measure this discrimination. Therefore, you don't have a case.
Yeah, and nobody's saying there isn't discrimination. It's just you can't necessarily, like, if you could find it, if you could say, okay, this institution is paying these women so much, they're exploiting these women or whatever, take them to court, right? If you can find documents, great, go to court. Equal pay is already enshrined in pretty much most first world countries. But if you can't actually do that, and all of these women that they're surveying are working these jobs, and there's no evidence of that to be able to support it, then there's no case.
So I wanted to kind of end, I guess, my segment on the wage gap. There's a real quick thing I wanted to throw in here, because so you remember we talked on the Thanksgiving stream about this person that did this whole thing about killing animals, veganism, and I kind of trolled and said I'm going to take pictures of so many turkeys and put it all over the internet. I was just told today this individual is continuing this veganism crusade on Facebook, and people that are still being able to see this person's stuff. This person is going to slaughterhouses,
right?
Where they got the pigs and everything and animals, going up to the pigs about to be slaughtered,
right? Screaming
and crying.
Oh, really?
Apologizing for the violence that is about to happen to them. I shouldn't say screaming. Let me read this quick. Because I got this message, and I was like, you cannot be serious. This person is like on a vegan, the pro-choice vegan.
That's almost as crazy as the women who are having sex with Mother Earth.
Oh, jeez. Let's see. Posting videos of going up to pig slaughter trucks and tearfully apologizing to the pigs. So not screaming, but tearfully apologizing to the pigs. Right. Videos on this person's Facebook. And I'm just like, are you serious? This person's like, yeah.
That's really messed up.
But my friend that sent me this was hilarious. I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, dead serious. But not as dead as those pigs are about to be.
Oh no! As the old meme says, if God didn't want us to eat animals, He wouldn't have made them out of food.
And he said this person is an oxymoron because they're a pro-choice vegan.
Oh, so they believe in abortion. But killing animals, they go and cry and plead.
Yeah.
And apologize.
And you can't be taken seriously. You can't be taken seriously to talk about climate change while eating a steak.
Right. Well, that's
or
what
just
we call
any meat.
A very special person.
So, just real quick, just so everyone knows, I'll be making a quick little announcement at the end, let you guys know what's going on, because we will be having some major things happening on the channel, I guess.
Really?
Well, I could call it major, but
Awesome.
anyways, go ahead with the NHS, the also amazing institution of the UK.
After that amazing gem, I think we should start with this one.
Oh, let's see here. What do we got? What do we got? News from elsewhere.
Bored Russian man crashes armored vehicle into a shop.
That is fucking awesome.
Oh, I love Russians. Russians are amazing, man. So a Russian man has been arrested after he reportedly stole an armored vehicle and crashed it into a shop in town north of the Arctic Circle, right? According to the regional... Well, I mean, fucking Russia, man. Come on. Where else are you going to steal an armored vehicle? According to the regional outlet, hibinfo.ru, the unnamed culprit took the vehicle from a driving school. I mean, do Russians just leave tanks around to learn how to drive? I mean, how awesome is that?
Well, it's north of the Arctic Circle. It's pretty cold. You need some pretty heavy-duty vehicles.
Maybe, man. Before failing to negotiate a bend, destroying a car, and crashing into a shop in front of the northwestern town of Apathy. Here's the best part. He's also suspected of stealing a bottle of wine from the supermarket. And it was the very bottle that the policeman detained him with. So he crashes into this store.
Steals a bottle of wine.
Steals a bottle of wine and just walks off.
And the cop...
And the cops catch him with the bottle of wine.
How Russian is this article?
This is on the BBC, man.
News from elsewhere? I love how it says news from elsewhere.
Yeah. I sent this to my Russian friend, and she could not stop laughing. So I thought we could just kind of slip that in there really quick before.
Stereotypical Russian.
Typical Russian, man. I got to send you that video. She sent it to me. Did I send it to you? Like all the Russian cliches.
Oh, yeah.
If we could find a YouTube link, we could probably put that on the stream. But yes, now to my favorite topic, of which, I've actually been guilty of doing a lot of videos about the NHS. And the NHS is the National Health Service of the UK. Well, MI5 and MI6 is probably tuned in at this point. And I get bombarded by all the fake accounts from their public relations department basically telling me, I'm full of shit for criticizing the NHS. But then they do stuff like this, right? Where every winter there's a flood of people going into the accident and emergency, from accidents, flus, all different sorts of things. So every winter there's a crisis, right? They're making it sound like this is a unique thing, but this happens every year. So in order to deal with the onslaught of the winter crisis, the NHS in England has decided that they're going to cancel non-emergency surgeries for the entire month of January. Right? So as it says here, tens of thousands of patients are having their surgeries canceled at the hospitals. Will have to make up makeshift wards and dramatic escalation in the NHS efforts to avoid services going into a meltdown this winter.
Jesus.
In an unprecedented edict, the NHS England has told hospitals to delay operations such as cataract removements, hip and knee replacements until mid-January. The only exception to the new policy are cancer operations that also the NHS calls
thank God.
time-critical procedures. Not all cancer, just time-critical procedures where the surgery has to go ahead to avoid patients' conditions deteriorating further. I don't know if I can't remember. No, they didn't. They didn't put the number, but I think it was.
If you got a little cancer and we can, get it taken care of now. Fuck that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think the last count I saw was almost 15,000 operations were canceled. I'm not seeing it in this article, but another article that I read, actually gave a number. So, I mean, as much as, look, I want the NHS to be the greatest health system in the world. I'm out here in the UK. I'm kind of relying on this nonsense, on this Leviathan, right? I pay towards this with my taxes. There's a possibility that I might have some family coming across here. I want this to be the best that it is. But when I point out the obvious flaws, such as the last video I did where the NHS Trust in Hertfordshire actually denied service to people who were obese or they were smokers. They refused to give them service unless they quit smoking or lost weight. Or similarly, when I point out, like, the health systems in Germany, Norway, Amsterdam, all of Europe, Japan, Singapore, they also get cold weather. They're not shutting down their hospitals and canceling surgeries to deal with winter, especially the Norwegians that practically live in winter. But the NHS, again,
Right.
because it's a political animal, not a healthcare animal. They're competing for government funds. The incentives within the NHS they have to create crisis. In fact, they've become so good at it now, they're panicking because the system is actually falling apart. So they put out these public relations spins and be like, no, it's not a crisis. No, we can handle it. Because if they really let it deteriorate too far, people are just going to be like, fuck it, this thing's not working. We need to do something else. But at the end of the day, Germany doesn't have this problem. Norway doesn't have this problem. Sweden, Switzerland, you could point to any of the social healthcare insurance systems around the world. None of them have this issue. And even in America, because it's a private health insurance. So the money doesn't come directly from the state. It comes from the patients, right? So yes, they pool their money, but the money tends to follow the patients because it's private insurance. And as a result, you have to have like incentives and stuff like that to get paid. But the incentives in the UK, because of the administrators and the trust people and stuff like that, they control all the money. And as I say, the administrators and stuff like that, they can decide. And if they actually were to go and solve the issue, tend to all the needs that they had, like have enough beds and do all this other kinds of stuff, they couldn't petition for more money because they'd be efficient, right? So countries like Australia and Singapore pay a fraction of their GDP towards their healthcare systems as to what we're paying out here. And they don't have these problems. So again, that's reflecting, everybody, the left out here is screaming, just give them more money, just give them more money. Never mind the NHS has repeatedly received record funding. But again, that's not the issue. There are countries that do this for a lot less money, and they don't shut down entire hospitals and cancel operations for a month because of the weather, right? So I know I poke fun at the NHS a lot, but it is a very serious thing. And I think people are kind of waking up to it that, it's not necessarily the best system for care, right? People who get it, it's really good. They don't have to pay anything. But the rationing, the weights, and everything else, it's starting to add up. And I think people are starting to speak out about it, which I'm glad for. It should be something debated.
So we should definitely implement that here in the U.S.
Well, Obama tried, right? You see, again, but he did it with a government program. So the government mandate on healthcare, the Obamacare, basically handed over the private insurance business to the states, well, to the government, really. But everybody was mandated to buy private insurance. Now, if he had done that, but you had to buy local insurance in your state or across state lines, you would actually have affordable insurance. And if you didn't pack it with all this unnecessary shit, right? Like, you have to pay for prenatal care in your insurance policy, even though you're a fucking man, right? Like, you have all this unnecessary crap and garbage as a minimum policy. If they just let the markets do what they had to do, and you can shop around across states, because there's some states where, I don't know this as a fact, but Yaron Brooks of the Ayn Rand Institute, he actually did a study on insurance, and there's some states you could buy a very comprehensive plan for like $100 a month. But the reason the insurance companies don't want people to know that is because then everybody will just buy insurance there, and they would make the profits in other states. But what's needed is that kind of competition. So if I go to Germany, for instance, or a good friend of mine, he's out in Iceland right now, he is stipulated, or Switzerland, you have like 7 months to buy an insurance policy. It's mandated by the state, right? Now, again, I'm libertarian on it. I don't particularly feel that the state should force people to do that. But if you want universal coverage, That's the trade-off. And I'm okay. So if you're going to do that, but it's got to be a market system where insurance companies are competing for the best price.
Right.
They're trying to get the smallest, co-pays and the smallest systems that they can get. You need to do it like that if it is that you're going to do this universal coverage.
Well, it's like what what's his name? What Ben Shapiro tends to. He said there was some study that was put out that there's three foundations to healthcare, and you can only pick two of them.
Right.
There's universality, quality, and affordability.
Correct.
You can only pick two. If you try
Yes.
to do three, one of the three is going to fall apart.
Correct.
You're either going to have expensive healthcare. Some people are not going to get health. You're going to sacrifice one of the three. You just either it's not good enough, not affordable, or it's just not universal. There's then you start having rationing in some states. You have some there where it's way too expensive. You have some places where it's just shit quality, which ties into the universality part. I mean, like I've told you about Taiwan's universal healthcare.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people really like. I mean, it's not just in healthcare, but also dental and everything. Everything's super cheap. It's like a couple bucks for a visit, and but hospitals become sort of like conveyor belt, just big factories. You go in one and you come out the other door, and it's just huge waiting rooms, waiting in huge lines. Well, I shouldn't say huge lines, but like the average doctor in the U.S. sees about 30, maybe 40, like patients a day. 40 would be like a lot for a doctor.
Sure.
Taiwan, you would see 200 patients a day.
Yeah.
You're in a line, you get a number, and like I told you about the whole privacy thing. You step in the door, and there's two people ahead of you. One guy sitting with the doctor, another person who's just ahead of you, who's sitting with the nurse, getting their file all pulled up. You have a 5-minute visit with the doctor, 5 maybe 10-minute. So it's just you come in. So so now you get to know about this guy's medical history and everything, and you see the guy over there. Some cases, depending on what needs to be examined, the guy that's with the doctor, if he has to pull his pants down, pull his shirt up, have any sort of examination done, there's no real privacy. I mean, he might, depending on what kind of office you're in, you might have a curtain that you could work with, but I've been in situations as a young boy where I had to pull my pants down in front of some strangers, including the doctors.
Right.
Excuse me. But I mean, that's just what happens when you try to pull off universal healthcare.
Yeah.
You have. I mean, not saying like that, and not in that scale, but there's going to be drawbacks in different aspects of your care.
Correct. And this is it. The free market rations as well, right? It rations by cost. That's the trade-off, right? Right. Now, I personally, I believe you must give people choice. I think you can do both. I think you could have private insurance and this is the system in Trinidad. We have private hospitals, you have private doctors, you could go to a specialist. You don't need to go through a GP or anything like that. You could go directly to whoever you want. And if you can't afford it, we have government-run hospitals that everything within the government walls are done free of charge. Like complex operations, dentistry, whatever. So I don't think there's any problem to do both. I think you should allow both systems to work. So yeah, the private hospitals in Trinidad, very pricey, but you're going to get diagnosed pretty quick. You're going to get everything done almost immediately. Like when I had my issue with the pneumonia, I had pneumonia early of last year. And I went into the private hospital. I was diagnosed, x-rayed, MRI, blood test, everything within 20 minutes. And they knew exactly what was wrong. And I was admitted to the hospital. They put a nebulizer on my face, and I was there for about 48 hours. So a friend of mine who works at the general hospital said, well, why didn't you come to the general hospital? And I just simply said, it took me 20 minutes to figure out what was wrong because I got everything immediately. And she said, well, yeah, it would have taken about 2 days at the general hospital because the MRI, the x-ray and all that kind of stuff, you got to wait for that stuff. Now, I could have very well taken the results and then gone to the general hospital and got my treatment for free. Again, that's the power of choice. So I could have been diagnosed privately, got the information really quick, and then gone to the hospital for treatment for free. But that when you have a government-run system, you don't have those options, and that is the biggest drawback to this entire thing. So again, I'm not opposed to universal healthcare. If the UK is a very compassionate society, but we are making the trade-off, and not to mention the amount of migrants that are coming in. A lot of them from the third world and elsewhere. They're coming. Some of them are sick. Some of I'm not all migrants, as you say, but they are putting tax on the healthcare system because it literally is free, and they don't ask you for a passport or any kind of ID when you go in. So people travel from all around the world and they come here and they get free healthcare. And again, all of that is a tax on the resources, the time, the doctors, the beds, everything. And that's just you. This is the price you're going to pay. If you're going to do it this way, people are going to be left in the cracks. And that's just a reality.
What a great institution it is.
I mean, people criticize the US system, but you guys have a kind of a mix of both. And unlike a lot of these clowns, no, people are not dying in the streets in the US, at least not that I know of.
Because we talked about, like, universal healthcare is good at keeping people. What was it? The U.S. healthcare system keeps people from dying.
Yeah.
Whereas universal healthcare systems tend to just keep the healthiest people healthier.
Yeah, yeah.
By rationing.
At some point, the doctors, and we had a case in the UK of a very young baby boy that was born. I can't remember if it was premature or whatever. I got into a pretty serious fight with a nurse about this issue. And basically the NHS trust basically said there was nothing they can do. They basically said that the child is going to die. That's the end of it. But there was a doctor in the US who said he had some ridiculous, crazy experimental treatment that he was willing to do for this child. And there was a crowdfunding. They raised the money. Congress even passed a special legislative allowance to give this child citizenship so that it could come across to the US to do this experimental treatment. Now, the fact is, it was a long shot. It probably wasn't going to work. But the NHS, the doctors and the trust refused to release the child into the parents' care. That's how much power the NHS has.
Wow. I heard about that. I didn't know that it was to that degree.
Yeah, the doctor said this is a long shot. It's not going to work. The child is going to die. Accept it. And they refused to release the child. And it went to court in the UK, went to the Supreme Court to basically decide this simple notion. Who is in charge of the patient? Do the parents have the final say of care, or do the doctors of the NHS have the final say? And the fact that we even have to have that discussion shows you the lunacy of the system, right?
How is that even a question? I mean, we're not even talking about something crazy like anti-vaccine parents or some stupid shit like that. This is medical care, like life or death stuff.
Right, and this was the argument that I got into. But again, the brainwashing in the UK is so strong that the state is omnipotent, that they really believe that the doctors have the final say over the treatment of the child, not the parents. That is actually the lunacy that we're seeing take place out here. It is such a strong statewide, Leviathan thinking. So I tried to explain to a nurse and said, look, even if the parents wanted to take the child for acupuncture, right? It doesn't matter. It is their child. They have the right to do whatever it is. And if for no other reason than to have the peace of mind to say we tried everything we could, they should have had the right to take the child to the US and do the experimental treatment, even if we did everything we can. But that stronghold, again, when you give the state the power over the health of the entire country, they have the final say. Because this child is going to die, and if they were wrong, it would have dismantled the system, which is why they could not allow this child to leave. It became a political issue for power. So we're dealing with out here in the UK.
That's ridiculous.
There aren't even words, man. There aren't even words for the kind of crazy shit that's going on out here.
And I thought free speech was bad in Europe. Jesus.
And we need competition. We need to empower. We see you all have like a patient's bill of rights. I don't think we have that out here. We don't have a patient's bill of rights because the state retains the right to terminate your life if they don't think it's worth spending the resources on you.
What?
Right. Yeah. So if you're like 76 and you're diagnosed with cancer in the UK, they can refuse treatment and basically say, well, you've lived a good life.
I thought like they can just decide euthanasia.
Well, yeah, they can, which is what they did with this child. I mean, he probably, to be all fair, the child probably was going to die anyway. But that's exactly what they did. They basically said, well, look, we're refusing.
No, I mean like actual like rejection.
Oh, no,
like if you're sick, we're going to kill you.
I don't think there's any evidence of that, although they do unplug people. You know, if somebody is terminal in their esteem, they will unplug you from the machines because somebody else needs the machines.
I think that's equal. It's equal to that. Then, I mean, pulling a plug is I'd say is the same as. Well, actually, I shouldn't say. Well,
it's not. It's really legally, it's letting the body do what it would naturally do without.
Right, but I mean, I'd say it has to be up to the family at that point. I mean, based upon how we do it here in the States, it would be up to the family.
Sure, I would respect that.
It would cost a lot of money to keep a body going with all those machines, but at the end, the family reserves that right to pull the plug.
Correct. I mean, ideally, that's how it should be. In most private institutions, that's how it is, because they're getting a bill at the end of the day. If you want to leave him hooked up to the machines for a whole year, you can do that.
Yeah,
you're gonna get a bill.
In Taiwan, I had a relative that passed away. This was years ago, and I think it was a similar situation. So she had been in a comatose state, and something happened where they had to, where she started slipping, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically they had the decision to resuscitate her, right. And they left the decision up to her husband. Right. You know, by the time he got there and she was like on the very edge of being gone, he just said, "Let her go," kind of thing. So I don't know if that means that's how it always is, because they have universal health care and they allow that. But I mean, I'm guessing I don't know if that's possibly what it is going on, because she was in a comatose state for a while. So might be different there. I mean, Taiwan being more influenced by Western values, you never know. They might go about things similar to how we do things here. So
yeah, it's possible. It's possible. I mean, there's the opposite issue that's going on out here, where there's a very popular comedian. I can't remember her name, but her mom, she had cancer, and she was hooked up to a feeding tube. I think it was stomach cancer or something. But she was actually hooked up to a feeding tube where they actually inject the food through the nose into the stomach, sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And it was very uncomfortable, and I think it was causing some irritation or something like that. And she wanted to remove the feeding tubes, so that she wouldn't be as irritated and stuff like that. Consult with the doctors and this, that, and the other, and they had to sign a form basically saying that they're removing the feeding tube, whatever. And they signed this up, and they removed the tube. So okay, so she's more comfortable and whatever. But then they refused to feed her, like totally, because according to that signing, they're not allowed to give her any food. And the poor woman, this comedian woman, she had to feed her mom independently, because they signed this thing, and basically the NHS said, well, she's no longer our responsibility. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And when I try to explain to people that, look, okay, the NHS does have some good points, but the amount of people who die because of the system, not because we don't have treatments or, even cures perhaps, but because of the systematic issues of the NHS, more people die in the NHS than if they were treated in Germany, Belgium, Switzerland, any other country in the world. So on the track record of keeping people alive, the NHS is abysmal, right? And that has to be addressed.
Wow.
It's messed up. It's really messed up.
I thought universal healthcare was perfect, Brooke. I mean, so much of the country wanted it.
Yeah, so much of the country can't possibly be wrong.
Exactly.
Like all those Bernie supporters can't possibly be wrong.
No. They're never wrong.
All right, you want to see something funny, man?
Oh boy.
All right, let's see if I can get
We
this.
got another funny article.
Well, it's not funny, ha, but it's funny in the sense, like, well, you'll see. Let me share this one with you, right?
We got another Russian. Just kidding.
No, she's Italian. She's Italian.
Oh, I think you were telling me about this.
Catherine Deneuve claims of the Me Too witch hunt sparks a backlash. Now, people may not know this, but in Italy, they've actually tried to make catcalling, like when you whistle at a girl, they tried to make that illegal.
That's wolf whistling.
Well, right, you call it wolf whistling, we call it catcalling. But
catcalling we would say is like actually saying something like, hey girl, or whatever, like actually calling out to a girl, whereas wolf whistling is the whistling side of it.
Well, nonetheless, any kind of outreach like that is there's actually a feminist movement to try and make that illegal. Anyway, so I mean, about this whole Me Too hashtag, everybody who's being every woman that's being sexually assaulted.
And men.
And then, and certain animals and other things.
Ben Shapiro with Rosie O'Donnell.
Right. Some goats in the Middle East and, stuff like that. They got this whole Me Too hashtag, right? And of course, it's evolved into a monstrous, man-hating, man-bashing, just total campaign. But fortunately, there are a couple women out there with some common sense, and this lady Catherine, plus 100 other women, actresses and so forth, they've actually written a letter. Oh, sorry, she's French, not Italian, my mistake. Basically saying that look, getting a look from a guy or getting catcalled is not the same as rape and abuse. And, this Puritan thinking that, we're dealing with is just causing a huge backlash, basically saying that men should not have any interaction with women. So let me get into it here.
Without their consent.
Right, but I mean, how are you supposed to know, right? You're supposed to ask for consent to catcall, and then she doesn't give it to you, and that's rape. It's like you can't win.
Right.
So as it says here, the French actor Catherine Deneuve has sparked furious international backlash after she denounced the Me Too campaign against sexual harassment as a witch hunt against men. Deneuve and around 100 other women have signed an open letter blasting the new Puritanism and the avalanche of denunciations following claims that Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein had sexually assaulted dozens of women. In an angry riposte, French feminists described the letter's signatures as an apologist for rape and defenders of pedophiles, a reference to Deneuve and the vigorous support of the French-Polish film director Roman Polanski, who was convicted of raping a 13-year-old girl. There's nothing really new in the argument they use. They like to embarrass their colleagues or tired uncle who doesn't understand what's happening, a group of feminists wrote in the open letter of their own French radio. So these feminists are complaining that why these women screeching and basically they're rape apologists and stuff like that. So anyway, let me get to what Deneuve says, right? Right. On Tuesday, the Italian actress Asia Argento, among the first to accuse Weinstein, wrote on Twitter, Deneuve and the other feminists, French women, tell the world how their internalized misogyny has lobotomized them to the point of no return. The Deneuve letter, publicized in Le Monde, was signed by by other well-known French writers, artists, and academics, including Catherine Millet, author of the explicit 2002 Memoirs of the Sexual Life of Catherine M., which defends the libertine lifestyle. The letter claimed men have been summarily punished, forced out of their jobs when all they did was touch someone's knee or try to steal a kiss. The Me Too campaign, or in France, the Blanc de Porc, expose your pig, has unleashed a puritanical wave of purification, the letter said. Rape is a crime, but flirting, even persistently, or cack handling is not. Nor is men being gallant and macho an attack, reads the letter. We defend the freedom of impromptu, indispensable. Oh, sorry. We defend the freedom to impromptu, indispensable for sexual freedom. An assertion that makes touching up on the metro should be a non-event as also provoked fury. Catherine Devaux might very well have a different opinion about harassment if she weren't an extraordinarily beautiful, very rich white woman living in a bubble of the heightened privilege, as some of these people have empathized on Twitter. Right, where was it? All right. Let me see. There's something else. Not right. So it's basically she's saying, look, people should be allowed to seduce. There's somewhere that talks about seduction. I can't find it. But basically, in the letter, she basically says that men should be allowed to flirt and to seduce women, and that by no means is, considered rape, and it should not be included in this entire campaign.
You're saying men should woo women, like
yeah, seduce a woman. That's an art form, as anybody would know. Anyway, this whole thing comes on the backdrop of the Golden Globes. Did you see the Golden Globes?
I've heard about it, but I mean, I didn't watch it. Right. It was just Seth Meyers saying, "Hey, we got a lot to talk about," and that one guy's not going to be here. And it's like, are you talking about Weinstein? Are you talking about Trump? Who are you talking about here? And then it was just a bunch of Trump hating and Oprah, right. Becoming the next president in 2020 and stuff like that.
Exactly. At the Golden Globes, one of the best directors was a guy called James Franco. And the minute James Franco wins the Best Actor award, this shit shows up on the internet of somebody accusing him of sexual misconduct. Right? There's some woman, where is there? Some kind of B-roll actress, Violet Paley, basically says, "Oh, time's up, for James Franco. Remember that time that you pushed my head down in a car towards your exposed penis? And that other time you told my friend to come to your hotel when she was 17, after you had already been caught doing that to a different 17-year-old girl?" None of this came out before, right? The minute he wins the award, suddenly all of these accusations of sexual misconduct suddenly start showing up. No. Again, it shows that this has nothing to do with real sexual misconduct. I mean, the woman who's putting out this tweet is not even complaining about the sexual, conduct. She's actually complaining that he pushed her head down on his exposed penis. I mean, I don't know what she thought when his exposed penis was in the car and she got into the car, if they were just going to have a mutual conversation or, gain some knowledge from his third exposed eye or something. But this is the kind of nonsense that's going on, which again is what's causing this entire backlash of these women.
Yeah, it's interesting how accusations come out after someone wins something, after someone becomes successful, and you need to prove it, And, and then there's no context to what was going on there.
Exactly. But not anymore.
We could assume all sorts of stuff was going on in that car.
I mean, it's the heights of stupidity, right? So, feminists were complaining already that there weren't enough female directors for this category. So when a man won, this is what the Me Too campaign has basically become. Sourpuss women using the Me Too campaign to slander men when women do not live up to those expectations. When women don't win the prize, when women don't win the award or whatever, they just blame sexual harassment to try.
What was that whole mindset that we were grown up to understand, that if someone, like, if you have a goal, like you want to be successful, you want to win something, you want to do well in it, that someone else winning that you didn't want to win should motivate you to do better.
Correct.
And that was always like this. This sort of epitome of just being a good person, having good character, working towards your dreams. there's plenty of cases where there have been women directors, female actors, or actresses performing well in their field.
Correct.
But just because it's a Golden Globe, and I mean, I have a feeling that there's going to be some. Now we've been talking about Count Dankula, which, for those of you who don't know, his trial is now delayed to March the 20th. But I was watching a video he did. He did a prediction, and I'm going to make a prediction here for 2018. Right. There is going to be some award event. It might be like a women exclusive event, but all of them are going to win, either in some major event or some women centered, I should say, award event. All women are going to win, and someone is still going to make a fuss about some sexual misconduct, harassment, misogyny, sexism thing going on. Like all the major categories, women are going to win, and someone's going to still make a fuss.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that already, right? The Ghostbusters, for instance, well, not in the same vein, but the Ghostbusters remake with all female cast, right, wasn't diverse enough, right? So it's all women, but they're not enough women of color and disabled women.
Well, the female Doctor Who is not diverse enough.
Right. So then the Doctor Who character changes, and oh my God, she's not diverse enough. You know, what about the trans issues? You know, what about, Muslim minorities and all these other things? Man, we need to put her in a
disabled minorities.
Yeah. What we need is a disabled woman of color in a wheelchair who's Muslim crawling out of the TARDIS, and then we'll be happy, right? Because then we're representing all these people. The fact is, there is never you can't please these people.
So I'm just saying I'm just going to make a prediction to say that sometime this year there's going to be an award ceremony where women are winning, or like major categories where like women have you think it would fit the feminist narrative, but then someone's going to find something. What if it's her husband comes with her up to get the award, and it's like, why is it got to be about the man? Why does he have to go up there? Like, they're going to make some outrage about that, I bet.
Yeah, I
mark my words.
Like that. It'll probably be like, the National Organization for Women will do like a Women's Appreciation Award. You come out and you get your golden pussy hat and this sort of thing. And yeah, it's gonna, they're gonna honor all these women and stuff like that, and they will always find some reason to complain.
Exactly. But we're actually coming towards the end of the show here. I wanted to make
good timing, man.
Quick little thing here. So we have a viewer, and I have a good feeling it's probably our guest that's going to be on next week. So that's the thing now. We're going to have a guest. I actually got it pulled up here. Her name is, her YouTube channel is Kate Shep. She is a YouTuber that I found. I forgot if it was through Twitter. It was like her videos popped up on one of my recommended. She's down in Dallas, Texas.
Don't give away too much, man. You don't want to dox the poor thing.
I'm not gonna. No. But no, she's well, these are things that are like on her public info and stuff. But she has a YouTube channel, conservative political commentary, but she does a lot of stuff with motivational content. She really talks a lot about just being how to be happier, being a better person, stuff like that. But one thing that I had a little chat with her a couple of days ago, and we had discussed on a few things, and I found a good subject that she could share with us next week, which I think really ties into kind of what Brooke, you and I kind of in our experiences. We've seen different things with from our time in ministry and dealing with the religious folk. Right. She's seen similar things, more some of her past, not a religion, but similar frames where we kind of transitioned from religion into politics, and she transitioned from something else into more of the political sphere.
Awesome. I look forward to hearing her story.
Let me see here. Just kind of show you guys here. If you guys do want to subscribe to her channel, got it here. Kate Shep here. She actually has you actually have more subscribers than her, I just found out. So but hopefully we'll get some of her subscribers to come over to our channel as well.
That'd be cool. That's surprising. Pretty girls on the internet always seem to do better than old guys like me. But okay, I'll take it.
But she, you never know. By the end of the month, she's going to have more subscribers than you. So no, she knows that and kind of joke about it. But
let her use having her on for good. Let her bring her cuteness over here. And,
exactly.
But
she'll be on. She'll be on next week. We'll be having her on, kind of sharing a little bit. Not sure if we're going to do the full show with us, or she'll do maybe like a good 20-30 minutes of just sharing. But watch for that next week, Thursday, 11 o'clock Central Time. So, but yeah, thanks for joining us today, guys. As always, like, comment, and subscribe to the stream, as well as subscribe to both of our channels. Subscribe to Brook Potter. Subscribe to me. Also, we are on Twitter. Everything will be listed below, as well as the articles that we shared today. But yeah, anything you want to add, Brooke?
No. Just Happy New Year to everybody again. And, I hope you guys are keeping warm. It's very cold out here in the UK. I know even in the US, it's been pretty cold too, right?
Well, yeah, just to tell you guys, I'm in Minnesota, coming at you from Minnesota, and it is snowing outside right now.
Jeez.
It is. We had just come out of a nice little cold snap of 30. I'd say normal air temperature was about 15 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, and the wind chill was down to about 30-ish. So
minus 30.
Minus 30, yeah, the wind chill. So basically, with the temperature as the wind hits your skin. So for my job being outside, I had to bundle up quite a bit and stay warm, and just try to limit my exposure to the outdoors.
Not freeze.
Yeah, because there were a few times I almost literally froze my ass off, because I would actually feel, if you get cold enough, and you start feeling a little stinging or pain, that means you got to go inside and warm up.
Right.
And if you're feeling your ass is about to freeze off,
get into a fire.
Exactly. Yeah. But no, it's warmed up a bit now. We're above 0 now. We're in the teens.
That's good. I know that a lot of places have been having a lot of cold and stuff. So I just there's snow in the Sahara, which is pretty crazy. Yeah. Somebody call Al Gore and tell him we need some of that global warming.
Exactly. Weren't we supposed to be underwater by now? I don't know. But yeah,
like 20 feet, man.
Yeah, thanks for
thanks for watching, guys.
Catch us next week with our guest. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks again, guys.